Good morning, everybody, and happy Independence Day. You seem very excited. If you're with me reflecting on the scriptures last week, you remember that we heard two stories of miracles in the gospel reading. The story of the healing of the woman who had been ill for 12 years, and then the girl, Jairus' daughter, who was raised to life. Both these stories were inspired by faith. The first miracle by the faith of the woman who believed that she would be healed simply by touching Jesus' garments. And then the faith of Jairus, who was a synagogue official. Especially to the woman, Jesus had said, "Daughter, your faith has saved you." Then when he went to heal the little girl and raise her up to life, Jesus put out everybody who said that she was just sleeping, and they ridiculed Jesus. So for lack of faith, put them out. Now, all of chapter 5 of Mark, which is where last week's gospel came from, consists of 3 stories of healing. The first story of healing is that of a demoniac, and it precedes the stories of the woman who was ill for 12 years and the story of the little girl who was raised to life. In that story, the story of the demoniac, this man approached Jesus, and Mark tells us that he was possessed by a legion. In that story, Mark is telling us that even the legion acknowledged Jesus' power and confessed who Jesus was. He cried out, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High?" So basically what I'm saying is that chapter 5 of Mark, he's showing what faith is. But Mark is not done yet. He continues his examples of faith in chapter 6, and we hear today from chapter 6. This time, though, he adopts what is known in spirituality the via negativa, or giving us examples of non-faith. So you have 3 stories of faith, and then here's a story of non-faith. Thus, in today's gospel reading, Jesus encounters the lack of faith in his hometown. Unfortunately, Mark gives us no explanation of what he means by faith, or he doesn't define faith or the lack of it. It is left to the readers to develop their own definition of faith from these stories. And so here's my take on it. If you find it helpful, please take it with you. But I'm sure otherwise, in your own reflection, you can reach your own conclusions. But here are my 3 insights on faith today. First, the first noticeable thing in Mark's faith stories is that all 3 characters, the demoniac, the synagogue official Jairus, and the woman, took the initiative and approached Jesus. Now, you may not think that this is something revolutionary, but I think it's a very important gesture that all 3 of them take the initiative and they approach Jesus. The demoniac acknowledged Jesus. The synagogue official earnestly pleaded with him to lay hands on his daughter, and the ill woman said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Now, contrast this with the sentiments of today's first reading. Ezekiel is warned that the people God was sending him out to were hard of face and obstinate of heart. They lacked the faith of the characters in Mark's story. The rejection that Ezekiel was warned about is the kind of faithlessness that Jesus encountered in his hometown. Mark tells us that Jesus was amazed at their lack of faith. Even more, Jesus was unable to perform any mighty deed there. He's just performed 3 mighty miracles, but in his own hometown, nothing, except he just laid hands on a few people and cured them, but nothing spectacular. Through these stories, Mark was contrasting people with faith with the faithlessness of those who either could not bring themselves to believe in Jesus or outright reject Jesus. What shall we draw from this for ourselves? Folks, we are in church this morning, aren't we? We are in church. And I hope you realize the significance of this gesture. What are we doing? We're doing exactly what Jairus and the woman and the demoniac did. Whether it is with the faith of the woman ill for 12 years or Jairus or the demoniac, we are here. We have dared to approach God. Often people are too hard on themselves because they feel that unless there is a miracle, there is no faith, that their faith is weak. Nothing could be farther from the truth. First and foremost, faith is recognizing that God is God and then intentionally and confidentially approaching God. So this is a community of faith already by the fact that this morning we are approaching God. Faith is not first and foremost about definitions and creeds and doctrines and rites and rituals. Like the woman ill for 12 years, first and foremost, faith is about simply reaching out to touch God. So today, do not be harsh on yourself. Please give yourself more credit. Don't beat yourself up for lack of faith. If you find that you have the desire or even the thought to approach God, you are already a person of faith. The second thing we learn about faith from today's scripture readings is the ability of the demoniac, the ill woman, and Jairus to abandon their life completely in God's hands. The synagogue official set aside his status, his position, his power, and he earnestly begged Jesus to come and lay hands on his daughter. He's got nothing to lose, right? God, my daughter, my family, in your hands. The ill woman simply threw herself at Jesus' feet. When Jesus became aware that power had gone out of him, he inquired who touched him. Instinctively, she allowed herself to be vulnerable before God. And keep this word vulnerable at the back of your minds. If from this homily you take nothing else home except this one word, vulnerable, then I think we've come a long way. With this woman, she becomes totally vulnerable. No pretensions, no pride, no self-defense, no excuses, no justifications. She merely told Jesus, Mark says, the whole truth. Here it is, Lord. These people were not the people that Ezekiel is talking about, hard of face and obstinate of heart. So in my first point, if I said that faith is the ability to approach God, the second step in faith is to have the ability to be vulnerable before God. This is the meaning of Paul's declaration in today's second reading when he says, for when I am weak, then I am strong. You might as well say, when I'm vulnerable, then I have faith. Paul experienced a weakness in his life. He does not give us any details, but he calls it a thorn in the flesh. He pleads with the Lord that the weakness might leave him, but it did not. Finally, he comes to the realization that the Lord was inviting Paul to be vulnerable. The Lord said to him, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. Folks, faith is not about being strong. Faith is about being vulnerable. Faith is not about being strong. It's about being vulnerable. Faith is about laying our life, no matter what it is like, at the feet of the Lord. Faith is about knowing that it is when we are weak that we are strong. Faith is vulnerability. Faith is abandonment. And thirdly, the woman, the synagogue official, and the demoniac teach us one more thing about faith. On the one hand, they approached Jesus with confidence and became vulnerable before God. And on the other, they had a deep sense of awe as they stood before God. Let me use a story of the woman with the hemorrhage. When she realized that she was healed, and Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" Mark tells us that she approached Jesus with fear and trembling. With fear and trembling. And this ability to approach God with total confidence, right? And yet with fear and trembling is what we call the sense of awe. So we approach God, we have the confidence, we have the ability to be vulnerable, but we do all that with a sense of reverence, fear, trembling, awe. This woman knew the power of God, and she knew that she must acknowledge it, respect it, and reverence it. And this is the same true of the demoniac. He approached Jesus, drawing near to God, saying, "What have you to do with me?" And then he says, "Jesus, Son of the Most High." So he approaches Jesus, but he knows who Jesus is. He acknowledges, reverences it, respects it, acknowledges it. So the standing in the middle between total confidence and yet the sense of awe is another way to look at faith. Another way to describe faith is awe. In other words, faith is the ability and the confidence to draw near to God, yet to do it in fear and trembling. So today, as we approach God in this Eucharist, as we become vulnerable, as we lay our lives before God, let's do so in awe. For faith is to simply be before God, dare to be before God in awe. People of God said,